Alright, yo, what's up? My name's Patrouski, and we just got some really interesting information. Some clarity, some bombshells dropped in a hidden forum post on the PokeMMO forums. So I want to go ahead and cover this. Caillou went ahead and responded to some very passionate PokeMMO players who had some really interesting opinions. I personally disagree with them, but that doesn't really matter. We're here for the responses, and we're here for Caillou's information and Caillou's responses. So the initial poster, Draken, who is a very respected member of the PokeMMO community, if I'm not mistaken, and I know his name, really cool guy. So I personally disagree with him on this thing. That's totally okay. It doesn't make he's not a bad guy, not anything like that. So it's really important to make the note of that. Caillou go ahead and responds. The response is very passionate. I think we have very different opinions on how games should be developed, though. I won't be commenting on upcoming content, which just isn't near release. So essentially, Draken's whole post is about how Legendaries would bring balance to PvP, and talking about PvP and how he wants to see Legendaries and see all this stuff. And it's a lot of PvP talk. If you want to read through it, I will link this in the description below. You can go ahead and read through all of it in detail. We definitely don't have time for that in this video, but I'm going to read through all of Caillou's counterpoints and all of the mainstream information that'll be important to the most amount of people. Let's go ahead and continue reading. So this guy Paul, also posted, I always give Caillou the benefit of the doubt when people accuse him of holding mechanics hostage to keep us playing. I assume these features they teased in 2018 just weren't ready for release. Now he's just straight up confirming they're stalling their own content to milk our credit cards. Really shows a lack of confidence in their ability to create interesting / engaging content to keep their game alive. So before even responding to Caillou's post, I want to respond to this. I think this is an unbelievably unempathetic and like you're trying to not understand where the devs are coming from, in my opinion. I don't like this. I feel like this is coming from such a place of bitterness and such a place of not understanding where the devs. So the reason devs want to stall out content and not blow all their load in one go, right, and not release all content together is for a couple reasons. It's for balancing, it's for testing, it's for patience, and it is, to some extent, for longevity of the game. Now, when you think of longevity of the game, what do you think about? This person thinks about milking credit cards. I don't know why that's the first thought. When I think of longevity about the game, I think of consistent player base. I think of economic health. I think of player base health. I think of the consistent drive and just evenness to play. It's so weird to assume it's of malicious intent, I think, is where I'm really coming from. I think there is so much that needs to be proven before assuming malicious intent of someone. I don't think most people have these malicious intentions that people love to assume of them. So just wanted to address that really quickly. Caillou says, I think it's really difficult to fully understand how problematic releasing large swaths of new content, examples targeting Gen 6 as a base, is from a player's perspective. Decisions like those around hidden abilities buffer us against content droughts, which occur during prolonged periods of content development for very large projects, like introducing new regions. So what he's saying here is that it's really smart to keep, and I agree with him, it's not that they're not trying to milk credit cards. It's about okay, let's say PokeMMO just releases all hidden abilities now. Sick. They release it, it's all out. That's really exciting and really cool, but then let's say they don't update the game for another 16 months because they're working on Johto or something of that sort, right? So you have to think about, you have to be smart about it. You have to be realistic. It's just smart for the game's health and the game's player base. It has nothing to do with any sort of financial motives. It's literally just smart from a player base perspective and a developer perspective. And then he goes on to say, my comments were reference to having content ready to release, which this is fair. I think he comes to a fair understanding. I think he really comes around, which I really do appreciate from Paul. My comments were reference to having content ready to be released, but not releasing it in order to keep us playing the game for longer. You're stalling the progression of your own game to keep us interested in features that were teased 4 years ago. We're 10 years into the game, and only solution to the content drought is to keep core game mechanics from releasing, which is odd because you've shown the ability, blah, blah, blah. My perspective would be to release the basic mechanics that were teased 4 years ago and focus on the more custom content you've shown the ability to make interesting. And then he goes on to say, or Caillou goes on to say, all right, it wasn't ready. Installing the content doesn't generally make players play longer. I'm not sure why you have the latter opinion. This is interesting. To comment on hidden abilities themselves, they were mostly suffering from a lack of consensus as to what to do about them. While we originally did want to include them alongside Legos, which is Legendaries, eventually it became comical how long we were waiting, and it felt like it was about time. So we built something which could release them in a way which didn't feel completely lackluster. Goes on to talk about this. So much to talk about. I'm gonna skip through a lot of it. And then he goes, I thought you meant the players were enticed by the details of hidden abilities, that they had a star citizen type scenario. I believe this was a game that stalled content. I'm not completely sure of the reference. Kept dangling that promise for years on end, and players somehow took the bait. We suffer from some unique problems. This is probably the most interesting part, so sorry for all the rambling so far. This is probably the most important part of the video. We suffer from some unique problems because the game is structured on ROMs. A major one is that we have an absolutely finite amount of content to work with unless we do begin backporting items/abilities or shift to another base ROM. While it's my opinion that we do have the possibility of Gen 6 later on, again, it's very hard to appreciate how much R&D has gone into the game to even make it function at all. Our major options for additional ROM-based content are transitioning to Black and White 2 and Johto. Black and White 2 is going to be the most realistic consideration for our next base ROM, as the only major changes between Black and White 2 were script-based, if I recall. Johto is obviously a meme region, and while we'll do it, it doesn't really give us anything long-term. This is actually a really good point, aside from ticking another box and giving you another E4 to grind. That is true, just because players want it. It doesn't really give them anything functionality-wise. But anyway, the point I'm making is that it is everyone's interest for us to keep the game as interesting as possible for as long as possible. I think this is the most important point of the entire post. It's a mutual interest. It's not just them milking credit cards. And staggered hidden ability releases are one way to help achieve that. While we have definitely enjoyed a very successful few years, the next major introduction of new monsters is going to be a very long process, and we'd very much like to prevent a scenario like our Gen 3 to Gen 5 transition. I believe this is where I quit the game for a long time, where the game basically died for a year because we blew our load with no concern as to how we'd weather a very long content drought. And I think this is such an important post, but Paul goes on to have a very nice response, which I think is really fair. So Paul goes on to say, and I really like this post from Paul. I'm obviously saying a lot of things. I disagree with a lot of Paul's posts, but also his posts here are so good. So I want people to take away from this, like, everyone's got good and bad to say, and just because I disagree with it doesn't make it bad. And just take everything with a grain of salt and just flow with the conversation. This conversation is a good example of why we typically ask for more transparency/communication. True. Preach. This isn't something I considered prior to this thread. If your goal is to eventually work on future generations, which I had assumed were out of the picture, I understand wanting to have something lined up for the years it would take. On the topic of staggering abilities, are you able to share how often new alphas will become available and how the species will be decided for the swarms? The initial batch, this is a huge, interesting information. The initial batch has 50 evolution lines, some impactful, some not, and were hand-picked. Their introductions are meant to be unpredictable, so I can't really offer specifics. As far as I know, the tier council wants us to immediately complex ban anything impactful to OU until they can review it. This is so much interesting information. The unpredictability shouldn't be too much of a pain from a PvPer's perspective because they'll be instantly addressing it. This is so much information in this post. They talked about new alphas. They talked about the 50 evolution lines. They talked about the flow and staggering of updates. They talked about adding new generations. They talked about Gen 6. They talked about Johto. They talked about Black and White 2, which I never expected. I never thought Black and White 2... It's going to be the base ROM. That doesn't mean they're going to add the actual game. So, for example, Heart Gold. I guess, yeah, like Heart Gold is a base ROM to the game, or a very important ROM to the game. It's not the base ROM, but a base ROM. Right now, Black and White, I believe, is the base ROM. And that doesn't really, we don't have Heart Gold in the game essentially. But anyways, yeah, that's so much. That is so much information. That's pretty crazy. I'm still just taking it all in. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know all of your guys' thoughts on all of this down in the comments down below. I'd love to have just some proper discussion and some polite opinions. Let me know. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for daily PokeMMO content. Check out the Discord link down below. And if you want to go above and beyond and support the channel, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member, dropping a Twitch Prime or a Twitch sub, or hitting up my Patreon, PayPal, or Venmo. You guys know the drill. I appreciate you guys listening at all. It's really interesting stuff. Really exciting stuff. I feel like I don't have the energy, the hype at the moment. I'm a little tired, but that's okay. Anyways, I'll wrap it up. Hope you guys have a good day. I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching so much. Peace.